Welcome, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021, and this is a regular session of the Bloomington Common Council. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo.
Here.
Volan.
Here.
Rosenbarger.
Here.
Scambaluri.
Here.
Flaherty.
Here.
Piedmont Smith.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
And Sandberg.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just for those who may not have been part of earlier meetings, our friend and colleague, Councilmember Sims, is unable to be with us this evening. We send him our caring thoughts, and I will just be sitting in for him this evening. So with that, let's move to agenda summation. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve this evening. We'll then move into reports for council members, the mayor and city offices, council committees, and then we'll have our first period of public comment. We have, I believe, a number of appointments to boards and commissions this evening. We will move into legislation for second reading and resolutions, and that will include Resolution 2103 to approve recommendations of the mayor for distribution of community development block grant funds for 2021. Resolution 2106 to approve the City of Bloomington Tax Abatement Program General Standards, which amends and supersedes all former versions of the city's tax abatement program criteria and procedures. Ordinance 2106 to amend Title II, Administration and Personnel of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding adding Chapter 2.87, Protocols, Protections for People Experiencing Homelessness. We'll then move into legislation for first readings. That will include Ordinance 2107 to amend the City of Bloomington zoning maps by amending the district ordinance and preliminary plan for Parcel E of the Thompson PUD regarding 300 West Hillside Drive, Tom Brennan petitioner. Then Ordinance 2108 to amend the City of Bloomington zoning maps by rezoning 87 acres from planned unit development to mixed use corridor regarding 3100 West Fullerton Pike, Bill C. Brown Revocable Trust petitioner. Ordinance 2109 to amend Title IX of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Water Rate Adjustment. Ordinance 2110, an ordinance authorizing the acquisition, construction, and installation by the City of Bloomington, Indiana, of certain extensions and improvements to the city's waterworks utility, the issuance and sale of revenue bonds to provide funds for the payment of the costs thereof, and the collection, segregation, and distribution of revenues of such waterworks utility and other related matters. We'll then move into a second period of additional public comment, take up matters of council schedule, and then we'll adjourn. Councilmember Flaherty.
Madam Vice President, first I'd like to make a motion that we amend the agenda to consider legislation for first readings prior to the agenda item legislation for second readings and resolutions.
And second. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Just by way of explanation, anticipating that we may run into the 10:30 rule tonight, and knowing that it would be good for the first reading items to be introduced and referred, I thought getting that out of the way after the appointments to boards and commissions prior to second reading and resolutions might be a good idea.
Clerk Bolden?
Councilmember Flaherty, will you repeat your motion for me?
Sure. I move to amend the agenda to consider legislation for first readings prior to considering legislation for second readings and resolutions.
Thank you.
And is there any further discussion?
Yes, I have a question.
Councilmember Rallo. Sorry, didn't see you.
Does this disposal of the first readings include scheduling?
No, I wouldn't think so. Oh,
Okay.
Scheduling of the ordinances or scheduling matters for council?
Scheduling those, determining the schedule of those ordinances.
Oh, yeah, I would think so. Is that what you intended, Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes, if the council chooses to make a referral to committee of the first reading, we would have to set a time at that point. Yes.
Very good, thanks.
Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll? On the motion to amend the agenda.
Yes, Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we'll take up legislation for first readings prior to taking up legislation for second readings and resolutions this evening. So with that, we'll move into approval of minutes. Councilmember Flaherty.
Madam Vice President, I move that the minutes from the meetings of January 6th, 2021, February 25th, 2021, and February 24th, 2021 be approved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any changes to these minutes? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on this vote?
Yes, Councilmember Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
and Rallo.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That passes 8-0. All three sets of minutes are approved. With that, we'll move into reports. 4 sections under this, beginning with council members, then the mayor and city offices, then council committees, then the public. A maximum of 20 minutes is set aside for each part of this section. With that, I'll go to council members and I'll just read left to right on my screen to better the chances that I don't skip anybody by mistake. So Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes, just quickly, I want to announce that the Jack Hopkins Social Services Committee had our organizational meeting yesterday. So the spring round is underway. We, of course, did 2 rounds last year with respect to the COVID recovery efforts, but now we're starting our annual spring round. And so all the nonprofits will be getting notices very soon, and we will be off and running with our new spring granting program. Also, that the Plan Commission is going to begin hearing the issues related to the UDO revisions. That starts on Monday, the 8th. And of course, that's going to be a lengthy process, mostly on Monday evenings. There's one Thursday evening set aside on the 25th to discuss the Plexus issue. And then on the 29th, it'll be the last opportunity to deal with mapping revisions. So just a heads up. The Plan Commission, again, is underway, and we will hope to hear a lot of great discussion from the community and others with respect to those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo.
I have no report except to reiterate Vice President Scambalori, what you said earlier about extending kind thoughts to Doris and Jim Sims. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
I have no report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Volin.
I have no report, but I'd like to echo Councilmember Rallo's sentiments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
No report tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
No report tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
No report. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just have a couple items. First of all, I wanted to extend my thanks to a couple city staff members. First of all, Adam Wason, Director of Public Works, in recent weeks when we had the snowstorm, which seems very far away now, and we had to double up weeks on trash collection. He was very responsive. A number of residents in District 2 had questions about how that works, and he and his office were tremendously responsive, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. I also wanted to extend my thanks to Holly McLaughlin. She is the Communications Manager for City of Bloomington Utilities. Matlock Heights, some of you may know Matlock Heights experienced a water main break earlier this week, And she was very, very responsive to the residents there, and I just wanted to thank her for that. One additional note, my March constituent meeting is coming up this Saturday, the 6th, 1:30 p.m. The link to that meeting, it'll be done via Zoom. The link to that meeting is at sueforcitycouncil.com. So thank you, everyone. I'm not aware of any reports from the mayor and city offices. Mr. Lucas, is that accurate, or?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you. And are there any reports from council committees? Okay. With that, we'll move into our first period of public comment for the meeting. So you may want to begin queuing up for that using the raise hand function. The next 20 minutes will be the first of 2 public comment periods during this meeting. During this time, members of the public may speak on matters of community concern that are not listed on the agenda this evening. If you're here to speak on a particular piece of legislation, that opportunity will come when we take up that piece of legislation. You may speak during either public comment period, but not both. For those who wish to comment, please use the raise hand function in Zoom. Okay, usually you'll find that link or that button on the bottom of your, running across the bottom of your screen, or please send a message in chat to our meeting host. Mr. Lucas will be monitoring both, and he will unmute you when your turn comes. Mr. Lucas, do we have a sense? I see 6 hands so far.
I see 7 at the moment. And I don't see any messages coming in over the chat quite yet. I see seven requests. Should I go ahead and?
Yeah, in order to fit everybody in, may I suggest we stay with 4 minutes per speaker? Is that acceptable to the council? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
That would be 28 minutes.
So it would.
3 minutes perhaps per speaker would fit it in.
3
Almost.
minutes, it's still ooze over. Why don't let's work toward 3 minutes, because it's entirely possible that more people will ping in. And again, we have a good number of people who want to offer comment tonight. So with that, let's get started. Councilmember Volan, could I trouble you to keep time, please?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
It's 3
I
minutes.
do have a few requests now coming in over chat. And for members of the public who might not have caught this, this is an opportunity to speak on items not on tonight's agenda. If you are here to speak to one of the ordinances that appears on the agenda, there will be an opportunity to do so later on in the meeting.
Councilmember Volan?
Yes, Madam Vice President, I'd like to make Mr. Lucas's statement explicit. I think there are some people who want to speak to Ordinance 2106 regarding the situation of homelessness. Let me please emphasize that this is not the time. This is for it to address items other than what's on the agenda tonight. So if you're going to speak to that ordinance or the issue of homelessness in Bloomington, I'd ask that you not speak at this moment. It's going to come later in the meeting. Thank you.
With that, Mr. Lucas, who is our first speaker?
I believe first up is trip coverage, who should now be able to unmute.
Welcome, if you would, please state your full name. You'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Mark Allen Sturdivant.
Thank you, Mr. Sturdivant. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
My main concern is, and it's always been my concern, and I've seen it through other clients of Centerstone, is Centerstone actually contributes to the homeless problem here in Bloomington. And nobody does anything about it. Nobody cares. Even MCOM has done it too. These people need to be held accountable. I really believe if Centerstone wasn't the armpit of the mental health industry, then a lot of our homeless problems would end. Don't you agree?
Just for clarification, Mr. Sturdivant, this isn't a period of time for exchange and dialogue. This is simply for public comment. So please continue if you like.
It is what it is, and it's a fact. I got a number of people on a I'm not going to say, but I'm not going to go there, but you literally have Centerstone causing homelessness in Bloomington. You do. And you're not doing anything about it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Sturdivant. Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Mark Teller.
Mr. Teller, welcome. Please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, this is Mark Teller of the Bloomington Homeless Coalition. I am a board member. I'm not going to talk about homelessness right now. I'm going to talk about the recent article that was featured in the B Square Beacon regarding a wellness check that our Bloomington Police Department conducted. Granted, they conducted it on unhoused folk, but this isn't about the unhoused. This is about the absolute disgrace that I saw on those body cameras. These officers merely checked to make sure these humans weren't breathing and failed to even do that in one of those instances. These police officers walked up into these people's spaces and abruptly interrupted their lives. Not only that, but one of them later died or was dead at the time of contact, because we don't know, in the body camera footage, there's no audible noise from the person, there's no movement from the person. That person quite possibly was kicked while he was dead by a police officer, and then that police officer gave up and just moved on to the next person. This is egregious, it is disgusting, and it needs to be handled by the city. I can see right now that the chief of police is on here listening, and his comments about this are equally disturbing. This is normal, that there's no rules, there's no training regarding wellness checks. Then why are our police officers expected to do these things if they have no training and leave people dead on the streets when they do it? That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Teller. Mr. Lucas, who's next, please?
Next up is Paul Ash.
Mr. Ash, welcome. Please go ahead. You have 3
This
minutes.
is Elizabeth Cox Ash.
Ms.
It just
Cox.
shows up one of us on this.
Okay, Ms. Ash, please go ahead.
Okay. I want to address density. There is going to be a first reading of something, and the way I understand, we can't make comments after a first reading anyway. But this is in my neighborhood, which is McDowell Gardens, and McDowell Gardens, this is really too dense for McDowell Gardens. And the idea of having so much density, it really takes away from our affordable housing that's already in existence in McDowell Gardens, because South Madison has affordable homes. They are not covered with subsidies, but they are cheaper than a lot of the other homes throughout Bloomington. Yet this project is going to loom over, and they're going to lose all their privacy in their backyards and in their back windows of their houses with this, these high rises looking in on their homes. And we need to be protective of these affordable houses and the ways of life of those owners, and not try to cram density in where there are other places where there's vacant land. So perhaps relooking at this sort of thing and not allowing this, or allowing a smaller footprint, would be a possibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ash. Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Donielle Bird.
Ms. Bird, welcome. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you for allowing comment. My name is Donielle Bird, and I am a resident of Bloomington and a social worker. I too would like to comment on the welfare checks that were done by the police on the houseless individuals in December. That body cam footage was published by the B Square Beacon. And it demonstrated inadequate and inhumane care that ultimately led to one man's death. The park sweeps that took place prior to the welfare checks resulted in these people losing tents and the camp safe heaters that were provided by the mutual aid efforts of the community. I would like to also state that the city of Bloomington is not abiding by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 25, number 1. Everyone, this is the rights, everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood and circumstances beyond his control. So rather than simply determining if a person is dead or alive, a proper welfare check would encompass trying to provide an individual with medical care, dry clothing, a place to warm up, to get out of the elements. I urge the police department to utilize more humane practices when conducting welfare checks. Better yet, I encourage the city to support efforts to create a crisis response team that consists of mental health professionals and medics that are outside of the police. There are several models, including Cahoots out of Oregon and the Denver STAR program in Colorado. And so I do urge the city to re-examine their practices and really comply with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bird. Mr. Lucas?
Is Kay Goodman?
I'm sorry, say that again. You cut out for a second for me.
Kay Goodman, who should now be unmuted.
Thank you. Ms. Goodman, please confirm your full name if you would. And
Kay
you'll
Goodman.
have. Thank you. And you have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to tell a story that happened this week real quick. I work in one of the social service agencies here in town that is embedded in the Crestmont area. We were robbed Friday night, and this was after the self-sufficiency center closed. However, our campus, which houses young children and teachers, was still open. Our alarms went off all over the place. There was nobody in self-sufficiency. The person or persons knew that. The police came, and one of our employees begged them to go in, and they would not. They said they thought it was a fluke, that, you know, these alarms up here go off all the time. So they did not go in. So when we have cameras everywhere, and when we started watching the footage, the perpetrator was inside of the self-sufficiency building hiding. So if they had went in there, that perpetrator would have been caught. Here's the deal on that. What if one of us would have came in there? What if a child care worker wanted to use the copier and would have came in there? I feel like because of where we were located, that is why an inside check was not done. I have been upset about it. There were items taken, but everybody has been on edge all week. We don't feel safe, and we're upset because we feel like we have fed the community through the whole pandemic. We've made sure we started a delivery system. We have helped with rent and utilities, and we love our community. We've done all kinds of things to keep our community going. And I felt like that was a slap in the face, not going in and making sure everything was okay. And the reason I say this is because there is a stigma associated with people that have lack of funds, lack of housing, lack of just the essentials that every human being on this planet deserves. And quite frankly, I'm appalled. So here's what I say. We need to keep coming to these meetings. We need to keep banding together. We need to keep our voices risen, and we need to keep letting the people that want to stigmatize our community know that we're tired of it and we're not going to take it anymore. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Mr. Lucas?
Next up is the screen name seminary folks, who should be able to unmute.
And actually, by way of reminder too, if there's more than one individual on a particular Zoom call or Zoom link, please let us know that ahead of time. So
hi guys. So this cell phone is Jana Arthur's cell phone, and I have a question. I'm not sure if this is the most appropriate time.
Could you please state your name?
Yeah, this is Jana Arthur.
Oh, I thought you said it was just your cell phone. I'm sorry. Please go ahead, Ms. Arthur.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that I'm speaking at the correct time. Also, I'm trying to get to safety before nightfall, et cetera, et cetera. But I do have some other folks that may like to speak. And I just want to thank everyone that has already spoken. If I speak now, will I be allowed to speak on the items that are on the agenda? That is my first question.
Mr. Lucas?
Yes, the three items that appear under second readings and resolutions, there will be an opportunity for public comment on each of those.
Okay, so I just want to speak about safety and yeah, I just want to say a brief comment about safety in general. I have complex trauma, so I never feel safe. This is the least safe I've ever felt in my entire life. And I just also want to speak to basic human needs. Going to the restroom is the single hardest thing for me. My bladder is wrecked just from not being able to use the restroom. And I'm going to see if my friend would like to speak now or later. And I'm going to remain very calm. He's waving me off that he would not like to speak now. But I've been living and running the streets since December 25th. And I'm just really frustrated. I received services. I would like to give a shout out to Beacon, specifically Steve Taft at the overnight winter shelter. That man is a godsend. He is so good. Novella at Shalom Beacon, Sonia, a few of the other, Eric is, oh my gosh, such a good person. And I just want to say that Shalom is doing so many things for us. And I appreciate them so much. And I can't keep up with the internet. I don't know what people are saying about me, but personally, I was sort of a person that was doing a lot for the community. And as soon as I became one of, quote, them, end quote, things changed a lot for me. I used to be able to raise $1,000 in about 40 minutes. And now, like, I'm literally, the last day of February, I was so cold in my car. I had no gas. I had no key. But my family and my friends out here, you know, like everybody wants to talk about JT and all that. Like, dude, these are my family and my best friends. And I have no family. They are all dead. And most days if I'm lucky, if I have one or two friends. But these people that we're talking about, like, they're my everything. They are keeping me alive. If not for the skills and training I have received from my new friends and family, like I would not be alive. It's incredibly dangerous. This is a really strange time to be alive. So I appreciate everyone for listening and all that you guys are doing. And the few people out there that still are sending me a little bit of cash so I don't die, I appreciate you. That is all I'm going to say right now. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Arthur. Mr. Lucas?
Next up is RM. I believe that's Renee Miller.
Yes, welcome. Ms. Miller, I believe. Could you confirm your name for the record? And you'll have 3 minutes.
Ms. Miller, that's my name. No, it's Renee Miller. Thanks all for being here tonight. I have to find my notes because I know I want to speak later on agenda items. But first, I'd like to speak on the fact that I forgot the actual number, if I ever knew the number of parks that the city of Bloomington has, but it's over 30 public parks. This body and the city okayed $35 million be spent on another park. So I know that we can come up with a solution for some things that are going on locally with our unhoused people. And I urge everyone to work on those solutions and to spend taxpayers' money wisely. Take care of all members of the community, and that does include the unhoused people. But in regards to JT, as someone who has been a licensed medical first responder, me, I can assure you that your sanctioned officers did not do a proper check, medical check or a welfare check on him. They did not. They could have easily called an EMT or a paramedic, and they could have done that. But they did not. He chose not to. And that's quite sad. Now we saw a human being die from that. So let's hope that there's some training going forward where that doesn't happen again, because a nudge and saying, "Are you alive? Are you alive? Are you alive?" is not sufficient. Thank you. That's all I have for right now. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Councilmember Volan, I'm not sure where we are on time. Do we need a motion to extend this time for public comment a little?
I neglected to keep track of the overall period. I've just been tracking the 3 minutes per person, so I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay, we've had 7 speakers, so that would suggest to me that's 21 minutes. Right?
No, not everyone has used all their time, so I think there's at least 3 to 5 minutes left.
Okay, let's proceed then. Please go ahead. Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Alex Goodlad.
Mr. Goodlad, welcome. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, sorry, just took me a bit to unmute. So I won't need 3 minutes. I only need 1. I just want to give a moment of silence for James Vanderberg with the nickname JT, starting now. Thanks, and that's my time. I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Goodlad. Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Black Lives B-Town.
Welcome. Please share your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jada B. I am calling on behalf of Black Lives Matter Bloomington. We saw the video, of course, of the so-called wellness check, and it illuminates very clearly the inability of the police to effectively do the things that we are asking them to do. So often we hear city council members, police officers themselves, the police chiefs say they're stretched too thin, or we don't have enough services to cover these things. And that's why the responsibility should be taken away from them. It should be taken away from them and redistributed with funds to agencies who are capable of doing proper checks, proper welfare checks, not just incorporating social workers into the police, but creating divisions in our government and or supporting the divisions that already exist to support these sorts of things. I heard at the last meeting, we were talking about the ordinance last week, many of the city council members citing the undue burden that this would put on, that having this ordinance would put on our city workers. Well, why not take some money away from the police department and put it towards those services, hire new people, instead of constantly coming up with roadblocks and saying, no, we can't do this. No, we can't do this. Why not try for once to step outside and see that there are multiple solutions to a singular problem, and that just saying no over and over again, like I heard from Dave Rallo, like I heard from Sue Scambolari, like I heard from Susan Sandberg over and over again, that all we can do is say, no, 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 this isn't going to work. Why don't you come up with some solutions? We have tons of money in this town. This is a very wealthy town. We can come up with solutions so that the tragedy of JT's death doesn't happen again, that we don't reproduce it again. And those police officers who did a so-called welfare check should be held criminally responsible for his death. They did not do a welfare check. I was an RA for a number of years, and I saw welfare checks at Indiana University, what that looked like when a mom hadn't heard from her kid for 24 hours because her kid got drunk at a party and didn't want to call her mom. Those were half an hour time commitments, okay, from BPD and IUPD. So how is it that someone you know is at risk for exposure is not taken care of properly? This speaks to the term of discretion. We constantly hear that the police have discretion, and so often we see them use it incorrectly. This was an incorrect use of discretion. So take the responsibility away from them and give it to somebody who has, and organizations and programs that have proven to know what to do with their discretion, to know what to do with their funds, to support people properly.
Could you finish up your comments, please? That's 3 minutes.
I just did.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. B. Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Veronica Fazio, who should be able to unmute.
Ms. Fazio, could you confirm your name, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Veronica Fazio. I am an IU student and been a resident of Bloomington for a while now. I am calling on behalf of a friend of mine who is a member of the unhoused community. She has written a letter. She has written a letter that is going to be published in the Herald Times very shortly, but she wanted me to read it for all of you at the meeting tonight. Her name is Jessica Stump. She is currently in the hospital right now because she has COVID. She contracted this as a member of the unhoused community who's, they're not really being supported very well right now with that situation. But here's the letter that she wrote. To whom it may concern, I am speaking as a voice for many, those who have experienced the physical, mental, emotional, and psychological challenges that come with homelessness and addiction. We understand that the country is still experiencing the race to prevent the spread of a worldwide pandemic. We're grateful for those who volunteer their time and those who donate what they no longer need. There are many of us who were already supposed to be housed almost 6 months ago. You have opened an emergency shelter. There are some of us that are permanently or temporarily physically impaired. We are trying to be patient with authority and follow the rules. We are becoming restless. We would like to know what the city is doing to help its lower class citizens. We're a part of this society too. Every time the homeless try to make camp and stay warm, you run us out. There are very few areas we have left to go that are habitable. We won't disappear. We won't go away. We are a part of this community too. Is there anything that is being done to assist in getting the Kinzer Flats finished and open, to get some of the homeless off of the streets as well as help prevent the spread of the virus? With the most sincerity, the homeless community of the city of Bloomington. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fazio. Mr. Lucas?
Next, we have Nicole Johnson.
Point of order.
Yes.
I hadn't been keeping track of time since the beginning either, but I have
We're over time.
Perhaps we need to consider a motion to extend time for public comment.
It looks like we have 2 speakers remaining unless there is someone in chat, Mr. Lucas. Would we like to just finish out with these speakers rather than ask them to wait until later? Mr.
Madam
Boland?
Chair, point of order. One person who has their hand raised has already spoken. We're already at our time. If we just let the last comment go, that maybe we can just dispose of public comment. But, you know, a lot of it's already on items that are already on the agenda. So,
Councilmember Flaherty.
There's now 2 hands up that are folks who have not already spoken. Seeing that, I'd like to make a motion to extend public comment for 6 minutes for the 2 remaining speakers with their hands up.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we extend public comment period to allow for these 2 additional speakers. Is there discussion? Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Just for clarification, was the motion to extend it by 6 minutes, or was it to extend it to allow for 2 additional speakers?
We'll go with the first. I said both to clarify
Okay.
the motion to extend by 6 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rosenberger?
Yes.
Scambalori?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Rallo?
Yes.
And Volin?
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's 8-0. We'll extend this period of time for 6 minutes. And Ms. Johnson, I believe, was next.
Thank you very much for letting me speak. My name is Nicole Johnson, and I am director of Pigeon Hill Pantry and a resident of Pigeon Hill near Kay Goodman's establishment. And I'm so sorry to hear that that happened, Kay. Concerning body cam footage, discuss on the way that they left JT was absolutely not okay. The description on the application of the social worker embedded in the police department completely explains that those social workers aren't even first responders. It's available on the city site. Anybody can go look that up if they'd like. This proves that their current approach, that being BPD, is unsatisfactory, because the social workers, even if they hire more, would never be the ones to approach the person in need in the first place underneath the current protocol. And also, currently the BPD officers responding are obviously not trained well enough, as the video shows. Now, to amplify what Jada B said earlier, and also what she said to B Square Beacon, quote, comparing the police reaction to the houseless community and the Black community, Jada B said, the reactions may be different, but the outcome is the same, which is that people's actual welfare is not ever the primary concern. Police profiling can be defined as an organized civil force that maintains order and prevents crime by using specific characteristics to make generalizations about a person. Many people today, including most of us in this meeting, are against police profiling because of what it has done in the past. Thank you for your time. I yield my time.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And I don't see another request from someone who has not already spoken. I thought we had one, but apparently not. Mr. Lucas?
No, I'm not sure if Mr. Sturdivant has somebody else on the account with him. I've asked and not gotten a response. I can check in. Mr. Sturdivant, is there someone else on that account with you that would like to comment?
No response?
I'm having technical difficulties.
Mr. Sturdivant, is there someone else? We appreciate your comment earlier. Is there someone else who would like to make a comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't know.
Mr. Lucas, I think that's everyone.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and just by way of reminder, we have a second public comment period after we take up the legislation that's ahead. So thank you for your comments. With that, let's move to appointments to boards and commissions. I believe we have several.
Yes, Madam Vice President.
Councilmember Sandberg.
On behalf of the Community Affairs Committee, we have several commissions that we need to make appointments for this evening. And I will start with the status of Black males. And for that, we have Valence Hayes that we would like to appoint to seat C1. For the status of children and youth, we have Mecca Burris appointed to seat C3. For the Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday Celebration Commission, we have 2 appointees, Jessica Davis, seat C1, and Malik McCluskey, seat C3. And then last, for Animal Control Commission, we have a reappointment of Chris Hazel to retain her seat, and that would be C2.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay. Madam Clerk, were you able to capture all those names and seats?
Yes,
Great.
I was. Thank you.
Will you please call the roll then?
Yes, Councilmember Scambalori.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
Volin.
Yes.
And Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that passes 8-0. We appreciate the service of all those new appointments. So Councilmember Piedmont Smith, I think I saw your hand earlier.
Yes, but now I'm not sure if we already made this reappointment because I just checked in onboard and it's already there. I wanted to make a motion to reappoint Suzy Hamilton to the Board of Housing Quality Appeals in seat C1.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Clerk Bolden, will you please call the roll for us on the motion to appoint?
I believe that you made that reappointment on February 17th.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
You're welcome.
I
It's
forgot.
okay.
Would you like to withdraw that motion then?
Yes, I will withdraw the motion.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. Based on the recommendations of the Climate Action and Resilience Committee, I move reappointment of Pamela Jackson to seat C1 of the Human Rights Commission.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Go to a vote. Clerk Bolden, if you would, please call the roll on the motion to appoint.
Just one moment, please. Okay, Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes.
Volin.
Yes.
Rosenbarger.
Yes.
Scambalori.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is 8-0. Again, thank you in advance and in retrospect for your service. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. On behalf of the Housing Committee, I would like to recommend an appointment for the Historic Preservation Commission. That is Matthew Seaton for seat C4.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to appoint whenever you're ready?
Okay, Councilmember Rosenbarger, can you repeat that one for me, please?
Sure. It is the Historic Preservation Commission, seat C4. It's Matthew Seaton.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that would be Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes,
Flaherty.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
thank you. That's 8-0. Are there any additional appointments to boards and commissions? Covered a lot of ground. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of the committees for your good work. Thank you especially to those who are going to be serving. So with that, let's move to legislation for first reading. Councilmember Flaherty.
Madam Vice President, I move that ordinance 2107 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only by the clerk.
Second.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll? It's been moved and seconded.
Yes. Ordinance 2107. Let's see. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes,
Flaherty,
Yes.
and Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you. That's 8-0. Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2107 to amend the City of Bloomington zoning maps by amending the district ordinance and preliminary plan for parcel E of the Thompson PUD regarding 300 West Hillside Drive, Tom Brennan petitioner. The synopsis is as follows. Ordinance 2107 would amend the district ordinance and preliminary plan for parcel E of the Thompson PUD to allow for the construction of 19 townhomes and 104 multifamily residences. That's all.
Madam Vice President, could I make a motion
Please do.
to direct this legislation, ordinance 2107, to the Land Use Committee
I'll second that.
on March 10th at 7 p.m.
Still a second, Councilmember Smith?
Second that.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I'm wondering why 7 p.m. we have
Yeah, I was just going to say.
two items to discuss.
Okay, perhaps I need to describe more. I think that the first two items, A and B, of our legislation for first reading, that is ordinance 2107 and 2108, are properly should be heard at the Land Use Committee, or at least that's a motion I'd like to entertain. The items C and D, ordinance 2109 and 2110, I think would be better deliberated at a committee of the whole, simply because I think that there's a lot of implications of those particular ordinances. And I was going to propose a committee of the whole at 6 p.m. and land use committee at 7, but I'm open for any friendly amendments to that schedule.
Councilmember Flaherty and then Councilmember Volin.
Sure. Thanks, Councilmember Rallo, for the explanation. I do wonder if it's the will of the council to send the items for first reading tonight to those committees that you described, if we'd be better suited to take the standing committee first, perhaps at 5:30 p.m. For the land use committee, and perhaps allowing even an hour and a half for the consideration of those two items, and consider a committee of the whole or other committee meeting at 7 to consider the other items that would not go to land use committee. So flipping the order, I think, of what you anticipated. The additional reason why I think that might be a good idea is in case we are still discussing ordinance 2106 or anything else at committee of the whole, it would not be time bound in that 6 to 7 o'clock window.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. And I don't serve in the land use committee, so it was a little forward of me to assume. So I'd like to change that motion to send this item to the land use committee at 5:30 p.m. on March 10th.
Second.
Thank you. Councilmember Rowland, did you have a comment or question?
I did want to ask Councilmember Rallo what led him to believe that 2 items could be disposed of by committee of the whole in less than an hour, because that's how much time he had initially allotted for the committee of the whole. Does he believe that those things will not require much deliberation?
No, I didn't mean to imply that. It was simply a proposition that I wanted discussed, and I'm happy to have input on it. I agree with Councilmember Flaherty that we should leave the committee of the whole open-ended.
Thank you.
Further comment? Okay, we have a motion and a second to refer ordinance 2107 to the Land Use Committee. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Sorry about that. Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That's referred to the Land Use Committee, which will meet on March 10th at 5:30 p.m. Councilmember Flaherty, there you are.
I'd like to move that ordinance 2108 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to introduce and read by title and synopsis only. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to introduce?
Yes, I will. Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That's 8-0. Madam Clerk, will you please read?
Yes, ordinance 2108 to amend the City of Bloomington zoning maps by rezoning 87 acres from planned unit development to mixed-use corridor, MC regarding 3100 West Fullerton Pike. Bill C. Brown, revocable trust petitioner. The synopsis is as follows. Ordinance 2108 would rezone 87 acres from planned unit development to mixed-use corridor, MC. That is all.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Madam Vice President, I move that ordinance 2108 be referred to the Land Use Committee, which will meet on March 10th at 5:30.
Is there a second? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that this be referred to Land Use Committee. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on referral to Land Use? And you're muted whenever you get a chance to unmute. So.
Just a moment, please.
Sure. We're hurrying you along tonight, aren't we? So.
You're hustling. I appreciate it in some respects. Okay, Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo.
Yes. Oh, excuse me. I'd like to change that to no, Madam Clerk.
That's 7-1. That passes. That'll be referred to Land Use.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Parliamentarian, what's next?
I'd like to move that ordinance 2109 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to introduce?
Yes, Councilmember Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
and Volin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's 8-0. Will the clerk please read?
Yes, ordinance 2109 to amend Title 9 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Water Rate Adjustment. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance amends the rates and charges in Title 9 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Water to reflect increased costs of supplying water and services to customers and to make debt service payments on bond financing for required capital improvements.
Madam Vice President, I'd like to make a motion. Thank you. I'd like to make the motion that ordinance 2109 be referred to the committee of the whole at 7:30 p.m. on March 10th.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Was that 7:30? Did you say?
Yes, it is. It was under the assumption that it was the original proposition that Councilmember Flaherty thought that it would require an hour and a half to dispose of the two other pieces of legislation before land use.
The land use will begin at 5:30.
Oh, I'm sorry, 7 p.m., 7 p.m.
Okay.
My mistake. Thank you.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith and then Councilmember Volin.
I was wondering why this would not go to Community Affairs, which I believe has taken over the oversight of utilities.
Is that question directed to
Yes,
me?
yes.
As the maker of the motion? Yes, I think the water rates entail a broader discussion. It involves a lot of community members. It includes, large users of water, Indiana University, various companies and so forth. It involves individual ratepayers, involves everyone. And so I think it behooves us to listen to everyone as a group. And I think that this is a big item. So I think it takes a collective brain.
Councilmember Volin.
I continue to object to this characterization that somehow 4 members can't do advanced work for 9, but that's not really the issue here.
Not what I'm saying.
This is why I should not have voted to move first readings before second readings, because I expect tonight that there's going to be a motion for 2106 to be sent to an actual committee for 2 to 4 weeks of consideration. If we're going to send 2106 to Public Safety Committee, which I hope we will, that needs to be scheduled for next week as well. And we would have known that if we had dealt with that before we had dealt with first readings. So I think this is premature at best, misguided at worst. If we were to schedule it for the Community Affairs Committee, at least also they would be time limited. We have yet to pass legislation that says that committee of the whole must be time limited. By its definition, it's open-ended because it can't extend itself, even if legislation can be referred to it. So, for several reasons, this is a bad idea, and I would recommend that we refer to Community Affairs so that it's a little bit easier to schedule and to bump things back.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the standing committee system allows 2 hearings before sending an item back to the council. And as the matter is very important, as Councilmember Rallo said, to everybody in Bloomington and beyond, I think that the standing committee is a better vehicle for this because they can take more time with the issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
I appreciate Councilmember Volin's comments. I it was an unanticipated and unintended consequence of moving up first reading, that there may be impacts may happen during the second reading that would also affect scheduling of committee meetings. And actually for that reason, I think a standing committee meeting for this ordinance makes the most sense because it's time limited and we can schedule that. I will say alternatively, we could choose not to refer to committee and take this up at second reading in 2 weeks. It would be a discussion among all of us. If it's insufficient that night to vote on the matter, we could always send it to a third reading. So it's kind of a split the difference. And I'll just note as part of that, if it helps sweeten the deal on that proposal, we're, withdrawing Councilmember Rallo's motion and simply not referring this to committee. I think on some of the past votes, we've had sort of a difference of opinion on committee of the whole versus a standing committee. They've gone 5-4. I'll note we only have 8 of us here tonight. So technically it takes 5 votes to send to any committee, whether a committee of the whole or a standing committee. So for that reason too, maybe it makes sense to send this ordinance and the next to second reading.
Here.
May I just add that I would still contend that it involves and impacts all ratepayers, and therefore all representatives should be part of the deliberations of this legislation. Thanks.
Councilmember Boland?
All representatives always are part of this deliberation, always. But
Not in the standing committee.
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Boland, please go ahead.
They will always have a role in the decision. All 9 members have the final vote, but Councilmember Flaherty's idea is a good one, especially if we are seriously considering, and I hope we will, send 2106 back to committee for 2 to 4 weeks. They can be taken up next week, and that will be a committee that we would want to schedule for a very long period to get details right of whatever amendments may come forward tonight. Meanwhile, if we simply, Councilmember Rallo can have the same effect if he really believes that all 9 members should be deliberating on all moments of this issue. There's no need to send it to committee of the whole, just send it to second reading and expect there to be a third reading. And we don't even need to do that if it's that obvious. Maybe we'll approve it on second reading. We've had plenty of issues before that have, for intentionally or unintentionally, not gotten a committee hearing. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's precedented, and that's a better solution than committee of the whole in this case, especially thinking about what's happening next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo?
Yes, well, first of all, I would say that Councilmember Volin is stating half the case, which is that standing committees don't necessarily preclude the input of all members because it's heard before a regular session, but it limits the input in the early process of all members, unless one were to come to comment, but you're not part of the deliberations as part of standing committee by definition. In terms of second reading, that assumes that we will have the sentiment to extend it to a second reading, whereas to committee of the whole, it's implicit. We will have 2 hearings. So I maintain that it should go to the committee of the whole by March 10th. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to refer to committee of the whole?
Apologies. Yes, Councilmember Scamillary?
Yes.
Flaherty?
No.
Piedmont Smith?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Rallo?
Yes.
Volin?
No.
Rosenbarger?
No.
That motion fails 4-4. Thank you, Madam Clerk. What is the will of council for ordinance 2109?
I'd like to make a motion to Send it for a second reading.
Point of order, we don't need to make a motion. We simply fail to refer to committee and it will automatically go to a second reading.
Very good. Thanks.
Good. Are there any other motions concerning ordinance 2109? Okay, thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
I move ordinance 2110 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only by the clerk.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll on the motion to introduce?
Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes,
Flair. Oh, sorry, I already asked you.
you had momentum, so
How's going?
that
Madam
passes.
Vice-
That passes 8-0. Will the clerk please read?
Ordinance 2110, an ordinance authorizing the acquisition, construction, and installation by the City of Bloomington, Indiana, of certain extensions and improvements to the city's water works utility, the issuance and sale of revenue bonds to provide funds for the payment of the cost thereof, and the collection, segregation, and distribution of the revenues of such waterworks utility and other related matters. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance authorizes the City of Bloomington to issue one or more series of its waterworks revenue bonds of 2022 in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $17,200,000. The 2022 bonds will be issued to finance the costs of design, engineering, acquisition, construction, equipping, and improvement of capital projects related to the Monroe Water Treatment Plant and distribution system of the waterworks utility and pay costs of issuance of the bonds. That's all.
Thank you.
Madam Vice President.
Councilmember Roller.
I would like to make a motion that ordinance 2110 be referred to committee of the whole March 10th at 7 p.m. for the reasons I stated for ordinance 2109.
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Councilmember Volin.
I object for the same reasons that I mentioned before. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas?
Just a point of information. I see Chris Wheeler on the call. I'm not sure if he's listening or able to unmute. The council may want to hear from him. I believe the rate case has a public hearing date attached to it that the legal department advertised, and perhaps Mr. Wheeler could confirm. I'm not remembering if that date was the March 10th date or the March 17th date. Mr. Wheeler, are you on the call? I'm not sure if he's by his computer. I can continue to try to get in touch with him and confirm that, but that may have some bearing on the council's actions here tonight.
Councilmember Volin.
Who authorized Mr. Wheeler or anyone to advertise the 10th as a date, knowing that we could in fact have a debate exactly like this one? Who in the administration assumed?
I'm not sure that they did advertise. Mr. Wheeler is saying March 17th.
Okay, that's acceptable. Thank you.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded that 2110 be referred to committee of the whole. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to refer?
Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Sandberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Rallo,
Yes.
Councilmember Volin,
No.
Councilmember Rosenbarger,
No.
Councilmember Scambalori,
Yes.
Councilmember Flaherty.
No.
Okay, thank you.
And that motion fails 4-4. So that moves it to second reading and the public hearing on Wednesday, March 17th. Is that correct? Councilmember Flaherty or Mr. Lucas?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Mr. Lucas, could you confirm?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And that takes care of legislation for first reading. We'll move now into legislation for second reading and resolutions.
Madam, Madam Vice President, I move that Resolution 2103 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only by the clerk.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to introduce?
Excuse me, Madam President, can you, or Vice President, can you give me just one moment, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Okay. So Resolution 2103, and you need the roll for introduce?
The motion to introduce, yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
thank you. Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
and Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
That motion passes 8-0. Madam Clerk, will you please read?
Yes, Resolution 2103, to approve recommendations of the mayor for distribution of community development block grant funds for 2021. The synopsis is as follows. The City of Bloomington is eligible for a community development block grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, estimated to be $1,018,000. This resolution outlines program recommendations by the mayor with input from the Citizens Advisory Committee and the Redevelopment Commission. Pursuant to federal regulations, CDBG allocations are made across the following general program areas: social services programs, physical improvements, and administrative services. Note, this resolution was revised after distribution in the legislative packet, but before introduction at the March 3rd, 2021 regular session to correctly list Monroe County United Ministries as receiving social services program funding and to eliminate a duplicated agency. You do not have a recommendation.
Thank you. And is there a motion to adopt, or was that taken? Councilmember Flaherty?
I move we adopt Resolution 2103.
I second that.
Second.
Thank you, everyone. And I believe we have Mr. Pierce with us from Housing and Neighborhood Development.
Sorry, I was having trouble finding Mr. Pierce on the participants list. Mr. Pierce, can you now unmute?
Counselors, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can.
Great. Sorry about that. So my screen does say Lila. However, this is Brent Pierce from the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department. There we go. Is that Stephen? Thank you very much for doing that to avoid further confusion. Thanks for your time this evening, counselors. I know that I haven't had the chance to meet most of you in person. I know that I've met some of you virtually. So if I'm meeting you for the first time, hello and thanks for your time this evening. I do really quickly want to echo what has been said a few times here this evening and to speak on behalf of hand department staff to send condolences to the Sims family for the loss of Kamisha. I know a lot of staff members have known Doris and her family for many years, and so I just wanted to be sure to let the council know that we send our condolences, and we're certainly thinking about the family at this tragic time. I do have a presentation. Am I able to share my screen? Is that a privilege that I have, Stephen?
You should be able to do so. Let me know if you have any problems, but there should be the share screen button at the bottom of your controls.
Okay. Well, it's pulling up. This is a MacBook. Steve, do you have?
I'm also happy. I've got it pulled up. If you'd like me to.
Okay, I went ahead and sent that earlier today, hoping that if I hit an issue, there we go. I thank you, Stephen, very much. The second slide, if we can. So thank you. I know a number of folks on the council have served on the Citizens Advisory Committee, whether it was this year or in years past. So you may be familiar, but so the hand department administers U.S. Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant Funds, or CDBG. And just for sort of a high level summary of the goals of the CDBG funds, they are to meet 3 objectives that are issued by HUD, which is 1, elimination of slum and blight, 2, to benefit low and moderate income households, and 3, to address urgent needs. And the percentages, the sort of pie graph breakdown of spending is also something that flows down to the city from HUD. 15% of the funds are to be spent on social services, 20% on admin, and 65% on physical improvements. The process sort of begins with citizen participation, and so the Citizens Advisory Committee is assembled, which is made up of residents, of elected officials, of folks who are interested in the process. And the 2 pools of funding, again, are social services and physical improvements. This year, we did have about $1 million, just over $1 million to spend, not to spend, but to allocate or award to these potential awardees that applied at the beginning of the process. Next slide, please. So the breakdown, the 65, 15, 20 for physical improvements, social services, and admin comes out to $661,700 for physical improvements, $152,700 for social services, and then administration comes out to $203,600, which brings us to the grand total. And so the applicants this year that were the applications that were reviewed by the Citizens Advisory Committee, and also once they were reviewed by we call it the CAC, the recommendations were then sent on to the Redevelopment Commission, who on March 16th reviewed the recommendations from the CAC. They, fortunately for hand and for the applicants, approved the resolution before them at the time to send this on to the full council. So that's why we're here tonight. The applicants and applications that were recommended by CAC to the RDC, who then passed it on to the council. Community kitchen is, so I guess we were starting with the social services pool of funding. Community kitchen was recommended to receive $25,000. The Hoosier Hills Food Bank, $25,000. Mother Hubbard's Covered, $25,000. United Ministries, $25,000. Boys and Girls Club, $25,000. I believe it's New Life, New Leaf, $25,000. And then the Monroe County School System, Broadview School, $2,700. Thank you. And then for the physical improvements pool of funding, Summit Hill, $200,000. United Ministries, $29,746. New Hope for Families, $216,901. Life Design 71,021, Centerstone 93,000, Middle Way House 12,000, and then the City of Bloomington Utilities to fund storm water repair at the Evergreen Village, $40,000. So that's sort of the high-level summary of the program, or the block grant, and the applications that were reviewed by the CAC and recommended to the Redevelopment Commission, and the commissioners unanimously approved the resolution to move on to the full council. The mayor's office has also been briefed on the recommended applications and applicants to receive these specific dollar amounts. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I did want to note that obviously COVID is top of mind for everybody. 2020 and this round of funding in particular, COVID has been taken into consideration. There was some a question that I received last week about trends in CDBG funding. What we have noticed, or at least noticed in this latest round, is a need for staff salary or staff time funding, which is CDBG specific, as opposed to some local dollars or philanthropic dollars or grants that don't go to fund staff time, which is incredibly important right now because volunteerism has decreased given the amount of time that really folks are allowed to be out and about and around other people and volunteering their time to these social services agencies. And so that really increased the need for CDBG funding in this sort of COVID era. So that was one thing that jumped out to myself and to hand staff as we move through this process, is that CDBG uniquely allows the city to fund salary and staff time, which helps to offset some of the decrease in just volunteer hours due to COVID. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions or address any concerns, but I will say that I'm thankful for the individuals who participated, certainly at the front end as a part of the Citizens Advisory Committee, just given there's a lot, the applications can be complicated, dense, and so the review was appreciated, and the recommendations as well. So I appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Let's come back to council for questions. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I had a question about a New Hope Family Shelter and the amount they receive. I'm not questioning the amount or anything. I'm just wondering about timelines, since I know that they will need to be moving soon. So the landscaping and the playground equipment, is that for their new facility? And will they be able to use it within the timeline required?
Thank you, Councilor. It is my understanding that it is for their new childcare facility. And if funding is heard this evening and approved upon council approval, it is available immediately for disbursement. So it's my understanding that the funding will be able to meet their timeline to get the project underway.
So if I may follow up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like Jack Hopkins where it's on a reimbursement basis. Does the agency get the funds up front?
So yes, so the applications as they were to come in, the understanding is that once the funding is approved, and that becomes available to be spent. So I don't believe there will be a delay in spending based on a reimbursement timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, additional questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if nobody else has one, I have another one. So my second question was in the memo from Mr. Pierce, there's mention that the city can allocate any program income received. And I think I ask about this every year because it's just not intuitive to me. Why would there be any program income? So could you explain that, please, Mr. Pierce?
Yeah, Council, I can do my best. And so in recent years, and I've asked about this, I've asked this question of staff. We recently haven't had program income to spend in the event there. The most recent amount of program income that I was made aware of, there was $80,000 of program income, and I believe it was in 2016 or 17. The way the program income works, in the event that we generate program income, and again, I would almost need to take this question away and get back to you on the specifics of why we would generate program income. But in the event that we do, that program income has to be spent before we spend a subsequent allocation from HUD. So it would have to it would be front in line for what would go out the door the following year before we could spend an allocation. And so it's, I guess the policy thinking behind that is that HUD doesn't want the program to be a sort of revenue generating and holding on to doesn't want to turn HUD funding, I guess, into revenue generation. It's, if you get it, you have to get it out the door the following year, or get out the door before your next allocation. So I am happy to report back to the council an example of program income. I just know that in recent years we haven't had any.
Yeah, if you could just get back to me via
Sure.
email, that would be good.
I
Thank
can
you.
do that.
Councilmember Sandberg, and then.
Thank you. Mr. Pierce, and this is a question too. It's my understanding, and maybe this is not accurate, that the 15% for social services spending is actually, that's a HUD guideline, but that cities are not bound to that, and that many cities don't use their CDBG allocations for social services, but the city of Bloomington traditionally has. That's been kind of a source of pride for those of us who support the social services. Is that also correct in your knowledge?
That is correct. And I asked about that myself as in sort of the lead up to this meeting. The HUD guideline is, it's really, in the event that you want to spend this on social services, you can't spend any more than 15% of the allocation. So to your point, yes, Bloomington wouldn't have to spend $1 on social services, but we choose to, and we choose to spend the maximum percentage that we're allowed to by federal law.
And Councilmember Smith.
I have a question and then a comment. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. When does, I appreciate the report and all the great information. When does the process begin again? Can you tell us?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Counselor. Very timely question. So we received notification from HUD late last week that we are, the next allocation for Bloomington has been determined. We will receive $904,000 in CDBG and $524,000 in all caps home funding from HUD. And so our allocation, that's in line with what we anticipated, maybe slightly more, but the process as it stands now, we have to put together an action plan that will be submitted to HUD, which lays out, it's a combination of things, but it's sort of we let HUD know current status of projects that have been funded, outcomes from projects that have been completed, and then how we hope to spend the money going forward that we receive. And so that's something you have to submit to HUD each year. It's their action plan. And then the fiscal year starts June 1st for HUD. So it runs June to May. So starting in June, once we're certain and going through some of the procedural, I guess, gates with HUD. Once we're through those, we can start the process over again in June of reaching out to nonprofits, making it public, the money that we'll have, and then, working to form the CAC, and then just sort of restarting the process. But the funding that we anticipate has, at this point in time, at least by, sort of a letter from HUD, been determined.
That's great. So the agencies can be aware that somewhere in June, you'll reach out to them. And that's really great. And having been a part of the process, I just wanted to say thank you to all your staff for all their help during the process of scheduling and calculating the amounts and helping us some technical expertise. Especially, I want to say thanks to Cody Toothman, who was very helpful. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. I'll let Cody know he received a shout out this evening.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Other questions? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes, as I was reading the packet, Exhibit A, for example, the fiscal improvement recommendations, the requested funds for each agency were exactly the same as the CAC recommendation, which seemed very odd to me. Can you explain why that would be, that they requested exactly what they got?
Yeah, sure, Counselor. There was enough money to fully fund each applicant's request this year. So the recommendation is based off of 100% of what they requested. So the recommendation came after what was received, and then once we determined the funds available to allocate. So the request came first, and then we were fortunate. I don't believe we're fortunate enough every year to fully fund, but we were this year, and that's why the recommendations reflect the initial requested amounts.
So it just happened that the sum of all the requested amounts equaled 65% of what we had available for the fiscal improvements?
Right. So, okay, there's a little bit of nuance to it, because what we, in previous years, program income, there have been projects that have come in under budget. And so in addition to our 2020 allocation of funding from HUD for CDBG, there was additional funding from Director Sims had set aside what effectively is a reserve because of possible unanticipated expenditures, but also, somebody did mention program income earlier, and then just savings and projects coming in under budget. And so we were able to take from that reserve fund, to spend the reserve fund in addition to the 2020 allocation to get to the total number that was requested. So we do anticipate there being additional funds available by way of that reserve fund going forward as well. And I'm happy to get the council the number that we believe is available. And as I mentioned, the $904,000 for the 2021 allocation is what we'll have coming from HUD in 2021. But there are previous years of reserves that are also available in case, or in the event that requests come in over what was allocated for 2021 HUD funding for CDBG.
Well, that's very fortunate. So, and I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you say that you can't tell us right now how much is in the reserve fund, but you'll get back to us?
Yeah, Counselor, I don't have that number in front of me. That
Okay.
being said, and I just wouldn't want to even estimate because I don't want to be wildly off on that.
Sure.
That being said, I can make a note here to get back with everybody, with all members of the council, to let you all know what we anticipate being available in the way of reserve funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions before we go to public comment? Okay, let's go to public comment. Again, this particular comment period is for Resolution 2103, CDBG funding for 2021. Mr. Lucas, could you let us know, for those of you who are interested in commenting, please use the raise hand function in Zoom or enter a note into chat. Mr. Lucas will be monitoring both of those and will let us know if we have any speakers that are interested.
At the moment, I believe I see trip coverage, which I believe is Mark Sturdivant, who should now be able to unmute.
Mr. Sturdivant, welcome. Please go ahead.
I appreciate you letting me speak, but didn't I just tell you that Centerstone makes people homeless and Income hires those people who made people homeless? Yet you're giving them thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, and you're not holding them accountable for what they do. So. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Sturdivant. Mr. Lucas, who's next?
Next up is John Zodi.
Mr. Zodi, welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Thank you, Madam Vice President. I just want to say hello to the council and thank Brent Pierce for he's acting director of HAND. I'll come on as HAND director on April 5th, and just wanted to reintroduce myself and say hello to the council and bring greetings tonight. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, any additional comment that you see? Let's give it another moment. Second call. Final call. And then let's come back. Sorry, let's come back to council for questions, additional. Seeing none, is there any final council comment? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, just thanks to Mr. Pierce, who was kind of thrown into the acting director role. And thanks also to Doris Sims, who obviously has stewarded our funds well, such that we have some reserves to help these organizations help the most needy in our community.
Thank you. Additional comment? If not, I'll just chime in and add to Councilmember Piedmont Smith and thank those who were part of the Citizen Advisory Committee. I had a chance to do that many years ago on CDBG, learned a great deal, and it further enhanced the respect I have for local nonprofits. So particularly for those of you who have taken time to serve during a pretty remarkable year, thank you for that. So any additional comments? In which case we have a motion to adopt. Madam Clerk, please call the roll for us.
Certainly. Councilmember Sandberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Rallo?
Yes.
Councilmember Volin?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Scambaluri?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
And Smith?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That passes 8-0. And again, our thanks to Mr. Pierce and to the Housing and Neighborhood Development staff.
Well, thank you all very much for your time this evening, and to those of you who served on the CAC as well. I know that that can be labor intensive. So appreciate your support, and we're looking forward to getting these funds out the door to help the community.
Thank you. With that, let's move to Resolution 2106. Councilmember Flaherty.
Madam Vice President, I move Resolution 2106 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only by the clerk.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to read by title and synopsis only. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to introduce?
Yes. Councilmember Rallo?
Yes.
Volin?
Yes.
Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Scambaluri?
Yes.
Flaherty?
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's 8-0. Madam Clerk, will the clerk please read?
Yes, Resolution 2106 to approve the City of Bloomington Tax Abatement Program General Standards, which amends and supersedes all former versions of the city's tax abatement program criteria and procedures. The synopsis is as follows. This resolution amends the general standards of the tax abatement program of the City of Bloomington. Based upon the recommendation of the city's Economic Development Commission, this resolution amends the eligibility criteria required of tax abatement applicants and allows for the creation of affordable housing units to be considered as a threshold criterion independently of economic development considerations. That's all.
You're muted.
Sorry, Mr. Parliamentarian, please go ahead.
Yes, I move resolution 2106 be adopted.
Second.
Thank you. And I believe we hear from Ms. Cooper-Smith this evening. Ms. Cooper-Smith, welcome. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Hello, council members, public. I will go ahead and share my screen and apologize for my de facto side eye as I read from my other screen. So, oh shoot. Maybe. Okay, well, it's really exciting. This is just pulled from our annual presentation. So thank you today for your time in considering Resolution 2106, the City of Bloomington Tax Abatement Program General Standards. The goal of this update is to bring affordable housing into the eligibility criteria so that it may be used as a primary justification for abatement, and to update the reference documents included under the evaluative criteria section of the guidelines. These guidelines were last updated in 2011. As a reminder, tax abatements are an economic incentive recommended by the City of Bloomington Economic Development Commission, authorized by the Bloomington Common Council, and administered by the county. Each tax abatement is customized. Variables are the percentage of abatement and the duration. The next two slides are examples of abatement projects that would have fallen under this affordable housing review criteria, eligibility criteria. The first is the Union at Crescent, which received an abatement of 100% of real estate property improvements for 10 years. They will provide 102 units at 60% area median income. The remaining 44 units may be rented at market rate, or they could also be rented out at an affordable rate. Let's see, Southern Knoll. Southern Knoll will enter its first year of abatement in 2021. All 31 units at Southern Knoll are affordable at either 60% or 80% AMI. 7 units are set aside as permanent supportive housing. These units are supported by Beacon. That note was from an old slide before the rebrand. 7 units are set aside for individuals with developmental disabilities and are supported by Life Designs. Sorry, I just wanted to look at the guidelines. Okay, so these are the guidelines with updates in red. So with the memo, which the guidelines are included in the resolution, which starts on page 48 of the packet. The creation of capital investment is the umbrella criterion, which is required of all abatement projects to be eligible for abatement.
Ms.
Yes.
Cooper-Smith, we don't see the guidelines on the screen.
Okay. Huh. Do you see the slide that I was looking at? Let's do over.
I was seeing Southern Knolls slide.
Weird. Okay. Let's try this. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, so you can see permanent living full-time permanent living wage jobs are no longer the umbrella. Creation of capital investment is the umbrella. And then the 3 criteria, the significant increase in full-time permanent living wage jobs, significant increase in existing wages, or creation of affordable housing units are now the 3 additional criteria. So in the past, as you all know, the creation or the increase in full-time permanent living wage jobs would have been mandatory. The affordable housing component of the tax abatement would have been a benefit, but we were still obligated to show the creation of jobs to go with each abatement. So I think this is just a necessary move that had been planned for a long time, and then properly places affordable housing as justification for our tax abatements. And then the following table is excerpted from the evaluative guidelines, and this is just to show that we've updated the source material. So we updated the references to planning documents and then allowed for any future planning documents, which was woefully overdue. I think that summarizes everything, and I'd be happy to take questions if you have them.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Coopersmith. Let's come back to council for questions. Councilmember Rollo, please go ahead.
Yes, Ms. Coopersmith, thank you. So the criteria involving increasing wages or creates affordable housing. So one could sub for the other, correct?
Right. Correct.
So why not both?
I think what we have found with the affordable housing projects, which you could see in the Southern Knoll slide, that they may only have 1 or 2 full-time jobs associated. And so it's difficult to justify an abatement only by the job creation. We will still receive reporting on the job creation, as that's part of the CF1, the compliance form that we receive, and we'll still compile that information for each abatement going forward.
I see. Okay. That's satisfactory. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Coopersmith. Will you give a brief, like what is the practical effect, and if you're somebody who's looking at this and doesn't understand about, like me, doesn't understand all the ins and outs of the abatement process and what it really does for our community, or what in layman's term does this change? What effect does this have?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think including affordable housing as one of our primary guidelines is really important, because it sets forth what one of our community priorities is. So this is one of 3 main priorities that we're focusing on with our abatements. So our abatements are a tool for economic development. And in addition to the requirement of capital investment in one of these community goods, there's also a but-for clause in our abatement applications. So this means that a project would not be able to be completed but for the receipt of a tax abatement. So this means that the abatement is essential in completing and launching this community good. So when Southern Knoll or Milestone came to us, of course I wasn't here at that time, they advanced these projects, presented these projects, and said that they couldn't complete them but for the support of the abatement. Is that
Yes.
sort of in a nutshell? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for putting it in a nutshell for me.
Thank you. Additional questions? Councilmember Rollo, was that a wave or no? No. Okay. Second round questions before we go to public comment. Okay, with that, let's go to public comment. Again, this is on resolution 2106, not ordinance 2106, the tax abatement general standards. If you would like to offer comments, please use the raise hand function in chat, or please send a message, or please use the raise hand function or send a message in chat, and Mr. Lucas will be monitoring both for us. So, Mr. Lucas?
Yes, first up, I believe we've got Jeff McKim.
Mr. McKim, welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Council. My name is Jeff McKim, and I serve on your Economic Development Commission, and I strongly support these changes to your guidelines. It's always been, honestly, a little cringeworthy to try to justify affordable housing projects, which nearly everyone was in support of, on the basis of creation of a half-time apartment maintenance position. Your tax abatement guidelines should support the policies that you want to achieve through abatements, and if affordable housing is one of those policy goals, then this change helps support that policy. So thank you for considering this.
Thank you, Mr. McKim. Mr. Lucas?
Next up, we've got Nathan Mutchler.
Mr. Mutchler, welcome. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Briefly, I would like to applaud the council for having the foresight to take something that seems counterintuitive, to take away revenues from the city or spend money to advance a social cause. As we consider other legislation, I'm confident the council will have the same foresight and confidence to look at the big picture spending and the net spending and revenue and gains to the community, instead of just the temporary and short-term losses or effects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mutchler. Additional public comment, Mr. Lucas?
No, I don't see any at the moment.
Okay, second call. Final call for public comment. Seeing none, let's come back to council for additional questions. Mr. Councilmember Volan, I think that's a hand raised. Oh, okay. No, that's a cursor. I'm sorry. Questions or any comments? Seeing no questions, are there any comments? Councilmember Piedmont Smith, sorry, didn't see you right away.
Well, I just wanted to thank Ms. Cooper Smith and everyone involved in this revision. I think it's a good move, and I especially appreciate all of our sustainability and climate action plans and other fundamental documents that guide us to be included in the evaluative guidelines for tax abatements.
Thank you. Further comment, Councilmember Flaherty.
Likewise, just a brief thank you to Ms. Cooper Smith and the commission for taking this on. I think these are really good changes and were nicely summarized and justified in the explanation. So I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Rallo.
I also agree, and for all the reasons stated, and this is better in alignment with our what our community needs. So it's a very good change. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional comment? Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Is it just me, or can we not hear Councilmember Rosenbarger?
Sorry, I was double muted and then I didn't unmute one of them. I don't know if anybody else does that. All the mutes at once. Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Cooper Smith as well. I am the council member appointed to the Economic Development Commission, and I'm excited to have these abatements. I'm excited about not the criteria, but the table that shows like things that we would love for people to consider. And I just wanted to sort of like pinpoint a few of them, if that's okay, because they're neat, right? So like I was looking through the sustainability action plan, and there's just stuff about buildings where our goal, like goal 2.1, is to reduce building energy use in Bloomington by 20%. So thinking about like how new builds can do something like that. Goal 2.2 is to increase the percentage of residential and commercial buildings using sustainable building certification programs. So incentivizing that stuff with our abatement folks, I think would be really great. And there's just like a ton of stuff, of course, in all of our plans. Transportation goals with urban hubs, infill development is really good for us. I think there's transportation demand management and of course the comprehensive plan. So just a lot of awesome things that we get to now sort of like point to for this and like encourage people to build and create, including of course like sidewalks and bike lanes and bus stops. So just very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments before we move to a vote? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2106. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Is that for me?
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Sandberg
Yes.
and Rallo.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you. That passes 8-0 and Resolution 2106 is adopted. And thank you again, Ms. Cooper-Smith, for the good work. So,
Thanks to you all for your time. I'm grateful.
have a good evening. Councilmember Flaherty.
Madam Vice President, I move that ordinance 2106 be introduced and read by title and synopsis only by the clerk.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to introduce?
So will Councilmember Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
and Volin.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes 8-0. Will the clerk please read?
Okay, ordinance 2106 to amend Title II of the Bloomington Municipal Code regarding adding Chapter 2.87 protections for people experiencing homelessness. The synopsis is as follows. This ordinance is sponsored by Councilmember Flaherty, Councilmember Rosenbarger, and Councilmember Piedmont Smith, and amends the Bloomington Municipal Code to add a new Chapter 2.87 entitled Protections for People Experiencing Homelessness. The new chapter includes procedures to be followed by the city before displacing individuals experiencing homelessness from certain public spaces. The procedures applicable to the city would include a notice requirement, collaboration with relevant service providers, a prohibition on displacing individuals if there is insufficient available housing, storage of personal, storage of personal property, and the ability to designate certain limited areas where these procedures would apply. Please note this ordinance was revised after distribution in the legislative packet, but before introduction at the regular session on February 17, 2021. The revision corrected a reference in the definition of camp to section 030G. Your committee of the whole recommendation from February 24, 2021 was no recommendation. And that's all.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I move that ordinance 2106 be referred to the Public Safety Committee
Second.
to meet, I'm sorry, I need to specify, don't I? To meet on Wednesday, March 10th at, what do we have?
7.
7 o'clock.
Okay,
I second.
and
I second.
Councilmember Volin was the second. Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith, do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. Yes, we've heard an awful lot about this ordinance, both for and against, and concerns and ideas related to the ordinance and how to protect people experiencing homelessness. And we sponsors have some ideas how we can perhaps revise the ordinance to gain greater support. And we would like to work through these ideas and other ideas brought forward by colleagues and members of the public and members of the administration. And the best venue we feel to work through those ideas for possible ordinance revisions would be a standing committee, where we would have additional two committee meetings before reporting back to the full council. That's why I proposed this evening. I do recognize that we have many people who are here tonight who would like to comment on the ordinance, but I would, if this motion passes, I would encourage them to return next week where we would have more in-depth discussion.
Councilmember Volin and then Flaherty.
My hand is not raised. I was just holding my head up. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Flaherty.
Yeah, just a point of order, actually. I would maybe suggest that Councilmember Piedmont Smith include in her motion a specific date by which the committee might be expected to refer back to council. We're a bit outside of normal procedure since this isn't a referral from second reading, the motion. So I think if the intent is to give the committee two committee nights, as is common practice for standing committees, that perhaps the April 7th regular session would be the appropriate time to refer back. So if Councilmember Piedmont Smith was interested in amending her motion in that way, that's just a thought.
Yes, thank you very much. I will amend my motion to move referral of ordinance 2106 to the Public Safety Committee for 7 p.m. on March 10th and to report back at the regular session on April 7th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Questions from council? Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure. I think it's probably appropriate just to debate the motion. So questions or comments, I think, would be welcome at this time. Someone please correct me if that's wrong. But I think this is just debate on the motion. In which case, I'll say a few things. I think I support the motion, and I think for the reasons highlighted by Councilmember Piedmont Smith, that there were some amendments that went out in the packet today that are reflective of feedback we've heard from the administration, from other council members, from some members of the public, that I think deserve adequate time for the administration, for all council members, for members of the public to weigh them and think about them and be prepared to speak to them in a way that may not happen tonight if we were to consider the ordinance tonight. One in particular is a rather substantive change that I think, again, deserves sort of more time to weigh. And the second point would be that I think this is an ordinance and an issue that deserves the full 9 members of council to take a final vote on, and that, of course, wouldn't happen tonight either. And I think if we're going to send it to committee, it would be better to do that at this point prior to discussion and debate this evening, rather than get to the end of the evening and potentially be sending it to committee at that time. So for those reasons, I support this motion. Thank you.
Councilmember Volin.
Yes, thanks. I have at least 3 reasons why I support this motion. One is we have heard that all members should consider issues of great importance to the city. One of our members can't be here tonight because of a family tragedy. I think it's important that he be able to weigh in on this issue, and he can't do that tonight. Number two, the debate has been significant. We've got, I would say, a roughly equal number of people on both sides of it debating it. And but even those who have opposed it, but members of the public and businesses, have expressed their concern over the humanitarian issues involved. And I've started to read in their email to us that they want to see a solution made up. If there's one benefit to this ordinance having been brought forward at all, it's that it has forced this long overdue conversation. And I think that, like with many other issues that we've seen recently, we have taken our time to deliberate on an issue of great long-term importance going down the road. Finally, the amendments that the sponsors have brought forward are, as Councilmember Flaherty said, complex. Frankly, everyone knows that there's one thing that everyone agrees on, is that the solution to the problem that this ordinance is trying to address is systemic and complex, and that we shouldn't pretend that we're necessarily going to solve every aspect of it or even begin to solve enough of it with this ordinance. But because the issues are complex, they deserve more time to be fully fleshed out. And as important, if not more important than the sending to a standing committee, is just the sheer amount of time that it takes to author good amendments. If we agree that legislation can and should be improved in the process of considering it, then it takes time to do so. And I'll note, if you can call it happily, that because of the fact that March has 5 Wednesdays, we've got a bonus extra week before April 7th, where if in the course of discussion of all the many facets of this detail, we find ourselves needing still more time to get everything right, then we have it. So for all those reasons, I would strongly encourage my colleagues to approve this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland. Additional comments? Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, I will certainly agree with the complexity of this issue, and I have carefully read the amendment work that the sponsors have put forward. But in my mind, based on a lot of deliberation, a lot of feedback from a lot of good people, I do not feel that the path we are currently on is frankly amendable. And so I would be voting no on sending this to a standing committee for further deliberation, because I frankly feel we're on the wrong path. I'm in complete agreement that this requires a broader coalition of professionals and members of our community. Part of my disagreement with the sponsors of this resolution is that it was not fully vetted before it came to us tonight. And so my preference would be to debate the issue tonight and move forward into a completely different direction in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment? Councilmember Rosenberg.
I'll just add a little example for the reasons already stated for in support of moving this to committee. A long time ago, at the beginning of 2020, an ordinance came to us that was known as the towing ordinance. That ordinance was in really rough form. And instead of throwing it out, we had multiple committee meetings. We invited experts, we asked them questions. We changed that ordinance and we came away with something that everyone liked and supported. So I would like to go that route again.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. every one of us on the city council wants to help people who are homeless. Even those who we disagree with, they're our allies. But we are sad and we are dismayed that we who don't support this ordinance are being vilified, threatened, yelled at, called names. This vilification, in my mind, risks alienating us and other people in the community who all want to be compassionate and do the right thing. Ordinance 2006 doesn't really help people who are homeless. It doesn't help them find treatment for mental illness or substance abuse. It doesn't help them find a case manager who
Point of
can help
order.
coordinate their services.
Madam Chair,
Doesn't
point of
help.
order.
Councilmember Smith, could you hold for a minute? Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
I feel like my colleague, Councilmember Smith, is not speaking to the motion on the table.
Well, I am.
The motion on the table is whether or not to send this ordinance to the
Yeah, I'm
Public
getting there.
Safety Committee.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Please go ahead, Councilmember Smith.
This ordinance doesn't really do and help people who are homeless. It drives a wedge into the community, and for that, I'm profoundly sorry. It's not savable. The ordinance itself, there's no way you can amend it. We need a different approach. We need a middle ground and not have people on opposing sides of the ordinance that is allowing a small number of people to camp in the parks. So I will not be supporting this ordinance tonight.
Point of order. It's a discussion of the motion, not the ordinance itself.
Councilmember Boland.
Yes, I'd like to ask my colleague, Councilmember Smith, if he would consider an amendment by substitution, if he believes that the ordinance cannot be salvaged under any circumstances and that it would therefore, there's no sense in sending it to committee. Does he intend to bring alternative legislation in order to, if he believes that this legislation cannot address the problem whatsoever, he has the ability, and with this motion, we would have plenty of time to consider an amendment by substitution, which is a very common technique we have used to basically amend by replacing the entire text of an ordinance. So I guess I would ask him two questions. One is, does he believe that this issue can be solved by a single ordinance? And secondly, does he not have any interest in amending by substitution? I'd like to hear answers to both questions.
I'm not familiar with amendment by substitution.
It simply means that you hollow out all the text and you put in new text. So the vehicle is still there, the issue's on the agenda, but you replace it with entirely new text.
And the other, to ask me the other question again?
The other question is, well, I've forgotten it too. The other question is, does he believe that this issue could be solved by a single perfect ordinance?
No, I don't. And as a corollary to that, I certainly have been trying to speak with people in the community and service providers and am conducting some further research into trying to figure out what can be a middle ground, what can be an acceptable compromise between, people that are on different sides of the issue, be it council members, be it people in the community, because as pointed out, this is a very complex issue. It's very difficult to figure out how do we mitigate homelessness in Bloomington. And my issue with the ordinance is it doesn't really address that.
I guess my final question would be, Mr. Smith, do you believe that there is any ordinance that could be written that would help mitigate the problem that this one's trying to address?
I don't know the answer to that, Mr.
Thank you.
Bowman.
Thank you.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you. I'll note that one of the amendments in the packet addendum that went out today is very much a compromise and a middle ground and a significant walk back in the protections of this ordinance. In fact, it's not something that is my first best policy solution, but it's in the interest of compromise and listening to the constituents and feedback we've gotten that it was brought. I think it needs more time, hence discussion. And I'll also say that we've gotten indications from people both in the business community as well as the service provider community that more time for more discussion on this question that this ordinance is tackling would be helpful, that there may indeed be middle ground and compromise. And I think it's incredibly important that we owe it to this community to try to take that time. So again, I really would urge my colleagues to let this take a full legislative cycle and path, and let all 9 members of the council vote on it in its final form at some point in the near future, whatever final form that is. It may not be a form I support. Perhaps it gets amended in a way that I don't even support. These are all possibilities. It's unknowable at this point. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Ross.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Well, we're speaking about the ordinance at hand and whether it's amendable. I think in many ways it's irredeemable in its present form. I can't imagine that it is going to be salvageable, but responding to Councilmember Flaherty's contention, I think that not extending this to committee doesn't preclude working on some solution. It can be worked on regardless. So I think that that's, not tenable argument.
Councilmember Volan.
I would ask Councilmember Rallo the same question I asked Councilmember Smith. Does he believe that there is any legislation that would improve this situation?
Such as?
I mean, the sponsors have proposed legislation to address the issue that we've been debating. You, like Councilmember Smith, have said that you believe that this is a problem that we need to address. We address things through legislation. Do you believe that this issue can be addressed in any way through legislation? And secondly, do you intend to bring some?
I think that legislation can play a role in addressing this problem. This is not the legislation that can. I agree with my colleagues. I think this is a very divisive part of legislative attempts. It's divided the community when we need community to join each other to address a common problem. And so this particular legislation, no. Is there a legislative remedy? I suppose there might be, but we'll see what that, what comes. I mean,
is it safe to say that
absolutely.
Is it safe to say that you intend or do not intend to make an effort to bring such legislation?
Well, it's too premature. I don't know. I mean, we needed a community discussion before we proceed on a remedy that, in my mind, is actually corrosive to the entire process.
That's what this motion proposes to do. Thank you.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes, this certainly could be addressed through legislation, but I would propose that it be done in cooperation with our employees, with cooperation with our administration, with cooperation with a broader coalition of professionals in the healthcare fields and in the caring fields. I believe at this point in time, if we don't take a pause, this discussion is not going to put us on the productive path that we all want to be on. this again, putting us on the spot and asking us to, on the fly, tell you what kind of legislation those of us who oppose this would want to bring forward is just as unfair and reactionary as what I perceive this original legislation to have been founded in. It was not done with the proper vetting. It was not done with the proper research. It was not done with thoughtfulness as to any kind of negative consequences that could come from this legislation. So I, am finding myself being put on a spot to try to come up with a magic solution that is so complex that this community is now divided. This good community is divided. And I would suggest that we put this on a pause so that everyone can reflect, everyone can come together in a better sense of what is our goal here and what are the best ways to achieve any goals that we establish. But this has all been done without proper communication with or consideration of the employees of our city who are going to be tasked with the execution of this. So yes, I oppose it. I don't think it's amendable. And I feel very strongly that if we don't stop this process, we're not going to be able to close the chapter to be able to open a door to a better way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Excuse me, my hand has been up
I
in the
apologize.
pause for quite a long time.
I apologize. I'm sorry. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Councilmember Flaherty. If we kill this ordinance, I feel like we're just sweeping the problem under the rug again. This is a very urgent problem. This is not something that we can take another 10 years, 20 years to deal with. This is a life or death issue. People are criminalized for sleeping. This is inhumane, and it has led to one death. It may lead to more. And there is an urgency to address this issue. And so I urge my colleagues, if you do not think that Ordinance 2106 is the answer, bring an ordinance, bring a different approach. But you see, I have had no indications from any colleagues that are opposed to this ordinance that they are going to bring a different approach. The amendments were composed by the sponsors of the ordinance. So if you're not even willing to reach out to us and work on amendments, then I just feel like you're trying to kill this so that we can ignore the problem again. And I feel that that is not just. I also feel like my colleagues are shortchanging myself, but especially Council Members Flaherty and Rosenbarger, who did work with the administration, who did work with experts in the field, including people who are experiencing homelessness themselves. I've seen much less baked legislation come through than this one. So I think it's a double standard at work. So I urge you, please, we're just asking for more time. I will be happy to meet with anybody in the community, with anybody on the staff, and with my colleagues to continue working on this issue. But please do not kill it because it is urgent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure, thank you. And I know it's hard to speak to the motion and not drift into speaking about the ordinance. I'll just note that on the merits of whether or not divisive issues should be heard, we've certainly heard plenty, including a climate lit proposal from the mayor that was a 5-4 vote on this council that was equally divisive in many ways. Yet some of the people who are now saying that we shouldn't even give this issue time in committee because it's divisive, we're perfectly happy to vote in favor of that on that divisive issue or against. It doesn't really matter. I appreciate that divisiveness is a challenge in the community. Sometimes it's a sign of growth and confronting an issue that is a challenging one. But I think it's a very, very poor execution of our duties as elected officials to try to short circuit the legislative process and not give things a full hearing simply because we disagree with them or we find them divisive. There are lots of things that are divisive. We will hear more of them. A legislative process with rules of procedure and order with where you can work through things and invite members of the public and experts to actually speak in a committee meeting, we could do that, is a really good way to work through these things. And I won't make more points related to that, but again, I would urge my colleagues to vote to extend the time for a committee to hear this for those reasons.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Volin.
Madam Vice President, you have yet to speak on this issue. I would like to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to get some things out of the way first, no, I don't have a magic alternative that I'm ready to present. No, I offer no guarantees that I will have a magic solution or a magic ordinance in the coming weeks. I'll comment perhaps another time on this, but it concerns me the degree to which people have been asking for guarantees the last couple of weeks around this issue. Could this ordinance be doctored over a couple of weeks? Of course it could. We know that. We know that's how committees work. The flaw in this ordinance that has troubled me the most from the beginning is that it was constructed without adequate, and yes, I acknowledge that sponsors have consulted with administration since. I certainly acknowledge that and I appreciate that, and with the business community. But this ordinance was originally constructed without that critical feedback. And that matters. So now we are in a position, if we focus on Ordinance 2106, we are putting Band-Aids and we are jerry-rigging something that I think we would be better served if we took a step back, started again with administration's participation and the nonprofit community and others. We've heard so much about how will staffing be handled. We've heard about broad philosophical differences about what is the city's responsibility. We have heard about from the local employers who have been experiencing this. We've heard from the homeless community. I would respectfully disagree with my colleague that if we don't support Ordinance 2106, we're going to wait another 10 years to address this issue. I just don't think that's accurate. And I think this has clearly brought the issue to the forefront, and I think that's a good thing. But I don't accept the assertion that if we don't pass 2106, we're just going to ignore this for another 10 years and sweep it under the rug. I would just respectfully disagree with that. I don't think that's accurate. I think the best solution is not going to come from putting Band-Aids and tinkering with an ordinance that was initially developed without, I think, some fairly critical consultation. I think that consultation needs to happen from the ground up. So I would not be inclined to send it to a committee. I would be inclined to move forward and then make a decision and then actually get to work on an ordinance and on or my guess is it will actually be a suite of ordinances that will actually make a difference and that actually takes into account a lot of different perspectives that weren't taken into account when this was developed.
Thank you.
Additional comments? Okay. With that, we have a motion.
Councilmember Rosenbarger had her hand up, and then Councilmember Rollo.
And so did Councilmember Rollo. I don't know. You just can't see us maybe.
No, actually, I couldn't see you. So Councilmember Rosenbarger, then Rollo.
I have a lot written down here, but I think the main thing I want to get out there is that when we started working on this, the entire council was emailed asking who else would like to work on this issue, and we opened it up to everyone. Councilmember Flaherty sent the initial email, and he sent many more along this process. And I think one other council member said they wanted to help on this. So the idea that you're going to help on it later is like, I'm just not seeing that historically, because you had every opportunity to write this ordinance or any ordinance with us. You had every opportunity to make changes along the way, like, and you didn't. So I think it would be great. I mean, most people that have their hands up so far are people who want to keep discussing this. And I mean, I think we owe it to them to keep discussing it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Volan, was that a hand raised?
No, Mr. Rollo was next.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Rollo, I apologize.
Yes, yes, I can you hear me? Well, you know, there's a lot of claims being thrown around here. That is to say that certain council members don't care about the subject or so forth. The administration has been doing work on it. I think that this particular ordinance is ill-conceived. It's ambiguous. There are many flaws. I don't think it's redeemable. I think it goes on the premise that we would open parks up in perpetuity to homeless. And I could throw back Councilmember Piedmont Smith's claim about it's led to one death. That's exactly what's led to one death, is allowing people to be exposed in parks. Is that the way forward? There's the claims that are being made here are very hyperbolic, and I would say that in terms of legislative process, I think that, you know, what we need is work done that is not prone to these kinds of wild claims about who cares and who doesn't care about the homeless. Clearly, we all do. It requires a community effort. And what I've observed is that this particular ordinance has been very caustic and divisive in the community and hasn't brought people together in order to achieve that end. So again, I think that this is, I think that the sponsors here read the tea leaves and see that it's probably going to fail, and this is an effort to try to salvage a very flawed piece of legislation that was really half-baked at best. Thanks.
Councilmember Sandberg, then Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. And again, I respectfully disagree that a welcoming mat was placed out for all of us to join in with the crafting of this resolution. When it was brought forward in a work session, it was already done. And if anybody wasn't jumping up to sign on with it, it's because, you know, I certainly didn't agree with it as good public policy. And then when I started questioning the validity of you know, how much of this has been well vetted with our staff, it really hadn't been. And it did start to become discussed with our staff, our employees who are going to be tasked with the responsibility and the expenses and the liabilities and everything with executing this policy. That was done after the fact, and I would beg to differ. I don't think staff is in agreement that this is a good policy. They've come out pretty clearly with some pretty compelling arguments for why it is not good public policy. And so once again, we are being put into camps that if you're for it, you're good. If you're against it, you're bad. And that, again, it's not about talking about a difficult topic. We are talking about a very difficult topic. We understand this. We understand the problem, and we have great concern about it. And I agree with my colleague that just because we oppose this, because we want to go into a different direction, we want to go in a better direction that is more inclusive, that does involve the stakeholders in a way that we can have a productive conversation that is not cruel. You know, as we speak, things are being said about me right now in the chat, and I'm good with that. I'm okay. But come on now, let's all take a pause on this until we can take a time out and sit down and figure out a better way forward. This is flawed public policy, and that is why I oppose it.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to say that I have never claimed that any of my colleagues or anybody really is opposed to helping people who are experiencing homelessness. I've never said that any colleague or any of the members of the public that have reached out to me don't care about homelessness. I think almost everybody in the community cares about homelessness, and certainly I know that my colleagues do. And I can, I think reasonable people can disagree. I just see an urgency that I think that some of my colleagues do not see. We do have the winter shelters that will be closing in April. Where are those individuals going to legally lay their head if we do not decriminalize homelessness? And believe me, if we have established last week that trespassing is a crime. Parks officially close at 11, and that an arrest or a citation could happen. And so to have that hanging over your head when you're homeless and you already have a myriad of other issues, it just is inhumane. Anyway, what I was actually trying to say is that I believe Councilmember Sandberg, Councilmember Rallo, everybody cares about homelessness. I do believe that. And then just to respond to Councilmember Rallo's mentioning again the life that was lost in December, it's my understanding that that individual had a tent and may have even had a heater prior to the first sweep of Seminary Park, and then did not have a tent when he passed away. So I'm not saying, one particular thing or another particular thing was the ultimate cause of that individual's death, but certainly it left him more vulnerable, the fact that the sweep did happen in December. So, I welcome better legislation from my colleagues and hope that they see the urgency in them bringing that legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Thanks. Just a note to try to keep it to the motion for all. Again, we are going to vote on this motion, and if the motion fails, and if we discuss tonight, of course, we'll have a robust discussion about this ordinance this evening. I'll just note two things. If it's bearing on people's thoughts about the motion as to whether or not this ordinance was developed with offers for input, I'll note that I emailed you all on January 7th and multiple times after, before any ordinance was drafted, asking everyone on the council to work on this issue if they are interested. Those who reached out worked on it. Second is that Council President Sims, again, is not able to be with us tonight for very understandable and sad reasons. And he, in particular, as chair of the Public Safety Committee, has been a leader on some of these issues among the council in the last year. He is the one who convened a listening session, or maybe two, I forget, maybe just one, in which we did have a public meeting and heard from many members of the public about concerns related to December and January actions the city took, which are in part the subject of Ordinance 2106. So I think regardless of your feelings about the development of this ordinance and whether the approach was right, and regardless of your feelings on the substance of the ordinance and whether or not you support it, I think it is very much a disservice to the public and to our Council President Sims to try to force a vote on this ordinance tonight. And just for that reason alone, if nothing else, I would encourage all to send this to committee. Thank you.
Additional comments, Councilmember Volan.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to point out today is March 3rd. Thanks to the 5th Wednesday in March, if we approve this motion, we'll have a full month, it would be as though we were starting from scratch, normal legislative cycle. There is plenty of time to make fixes if the majority saw fit. Secondly, Councilmember Scamboluri is the only person who has expressed opposition to this ordinance who has expressed an interest in forming some alternative legislation. For the other three members who spoke tonight, they haven't even expressed interest in advancing an alternative of any kind. it makes me think that their theory of council is that even though we're the legislative body of the city, legislation should not be initiated by the council, because I'm seeing no proposal forthcoming, no proposal of any kind, no intention to develop a proposal. We have a proposal on the table that needs work. It's been pointed out that it's not perfect, that we've had plenty of other legislation that hasn't been perfect when it first came forward. I too have brought legislation forward in the past that was criticized for seeming like it was already done. That was my intent when I prepared that legislation, was to say, look, I've done my homework. So, you know, like to hear Councilmember Rallo critique this by saying, well, it's because the sponsors are afraid that it's going to be defeated. Sure they are, but how very political is that? I mean, what essentially the opposition is saying here is that it doesn't matter that our ninth member isn't here for whatever reason, that they're not interested in the discussion any further, and they're going to use their leverage accordingly. So that's a very disappointing thing to hear, but more important than all of it is the simple idea. I mean, I question the very theory that my colleagues have of council. Are we supposed to initiate legislation, or should it come from the administration? Because I'm not hearing anything except from Councilmember Scambaluri in the way of some other immediate way to address what is arguably an unconstitutional and inhumane condition in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment? Second call? And final call? If not, I'll try one more comment. Seeing none, I'll jump in. It seems to, again, I am beyond concerned about some of the polarizing language I continue to hear. And the shots at colleagues and the degrees to which they are concerned or not. And we're taking that from the public too. And again, I don't want any of my colleagues to experience that, regardless of where they fall on this issue. It's an interesting question to me to think about what we delay. Sending this particular ordinance, I'm going to say that again, sending this particular ordinance to additional committee meetings, I believe will delay a more productive and inclusive conversation about actual ordinances and actual legislation that will make a difference. I want to thank Councilmember Piedmont Smith for acknowledging reasonable people can disagree, and that she believes, and I agree with her, that all of us feel some urgency and care about this issue. The question becomes, what do we delay? I would rather move forward and get to a more productive discussion and a more inclusive discussion sooner. Additional comments, additional debate? Madam Clerk, I don't even see you on screen anymore. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on the motion to refer?
Yes. Councilmember Scambaluri, we're starting with you.
No.
Flaherty?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Smith?
No.
Sandberg?
No.
Rallo?
No.
Volin?
Yes.
And Rosenbarger?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. That motion fails 4-4. And with that, we move back to an opportunity for presentation. Will the sponsors of the legislation wish to speak any further tonight? Councilmember, Councilmember Flaherty, sorry.
Sorry, as a point of order, we need a motion to adopt in order to consider that. I'll go ahead and do that. I move we adopt ordinance 2106.
Second.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Thank you. Okay. Would the sponsors like to present?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was muted. We're going to present the same thing as last time, since we've got about 200, a little under 200 members of the public here, and not everyone might have been here last week.